been thinking for a while about how games employ othering so much to make you feel like the good guy when you're fighting some monsters or zombies or whatever, and figured I would try to check out a couple games where there is actually almost no conflict, or at least none in the classical sense of physically fighting the mindless, irrational, soulless bad guys. Non-violent games are interesting because they need to work around the well-established mechanic of you, the good guy, versus the other, the bad guy. I wanted to think about the elements of storytelling and feelings these types of games go for. Chulip is kind of a game like that. The goal is to kiss as many characters as possible to strengthen the heart of our main character enough so that he is able to kiss quite literally the girl of his dreams. To be able to kiss them, you need to investigate and find out what the conditions will make them vulnerable to a kiss from you. You might need to give them something they like, or you might have to find them during the right time of the day. If you try to kiss them without fulfilling the conditions, they will attack you. It plays more like a puzzle or point-and-click game, and the game is very heavy with quirky social commentary, which it channels through mundanity and everyday life as you follow people around, waiting for a moment to try to kiss them, coupled with a lot of surreal moments and all-around weirdness in a good sense. After all, real life is weird. A lot of what the game has to offer is very based in Japanese culture. The core theme of the game supposedly came about because of how kissing in public is perceived in Japan versus how it is perceived in Europe, the former being more conservative about this matter. Even some of the puzzles are impossible to figure out if you, for example, are not familiar with Tokyo subway stations, but there's still a whole lot shown here that is very universal. The main trigger, let's say, for the narrative is that our main character is too poor to kiss the girl he's in love with, and under his dad's pressure he embarks on a journey to make his heart strong enough to basically impress her and be able to steal a little kiss. And so in his journey to strengthen his heart, we get to know and explore people's lives, their fears, their worries, and although everything might seem like a caricature, how actual daily life doesn't really make much sense loads of times. There are no megalomaniac goals of saving the world, and everything is very mundane and normal despite all of the surrealism. It seems like a very honest tribute to everyday life and to what people go through every day. There is no hero, no superpowers, no prophecies. At most, there's an alien that has crashed and wants to be able to return to whatever they came from. But they don't need a hidden artifact to be able to do this, they just need a frying pan, a computer, and a fridge. One of the main complaints the game had was that it was very tedious, especially in the mid to late game. The beginning is very bearable in this regard, and it's not super hard to find out what you need to do to kiss the first dozen or so characters. But the late game is legitimately frustrating, and even though I really liked it, I agree with that. But there are a couple elements here that, although boring, I guess kind of play into the social commentary. As an example, the game is separated into multiple areas that you can travel to by train. The late game area is a factory where you can die very easily with no way of healing yourself and not a lot of save points. To make it worse, you need to take 2 trains to get there, so it's very cumbersome. And leaving to save and heal and come back is very annoying because it takes forever. However, it's interesting to think that you needing to withstand so many hazards to commute and be in a factory illustrate what routine and commuting in real life can be. People stuck in traffic in real life will have the most violent outbursts, and quite honestly, it was the same with the train rides in Chulip. Now, it might not be fun to have as a gameplay mechanic, but would it really be cool if the game romanticized and made commuting fun? The time you spend in a factory also kind of illustrates this point. Before you can actually become an employee, you can visit the factory with a 1-day pass as a manager, and just to hide once inside, which allows you to explore during the night under a time limit, as during the morning the factory reopens. While you visit it during the day, everything runs under their time schedule. Every worker looks exactly the same, infantilized to the point of each one being the boss of their own small role, which they are happy with. Everything is kind of hostile, from the time limits to the dangers. The underground residents in this area are not only the hardest to reach, but are also the ones that will damage you the most. In the end, and again, it might make the game very tedious, but that's exactly in line with the representation that is being aimed. Everyone outside of the factory area has their own personality and distinctive look. Everyone here is the same and is rolled out on conveyor belts, like a product when it's time to work. It doesn't really feel like you should be allowed to have fun here. Sometimes being challenged by something the creator had in mind is more rewarding than just having our way with a piece of art and be done with it. And yeah, maybe, probably, in this case they didn't have it in mind. But there were still some conscious decisions that led up to this, and I can find some reason for them to be like they are. And it so happens that it kind of reinforces the storytelling, and I'm okay with that. In fact, I really like that. There are more kind of bizarre things that kind of go in parallel with the game's more goofier side. As you get to know some of the characters, you also end up knowing some of their darker secrets. The doctor that moonlights as kind of a vampire, taking blood from you if he finds you in the middle of the night, the policeman that will shoot you on sight if he finds you in the street at night as well. But there are a few that end up being more of a representation of real-world pressure on people. Goro, the retired film producer who spends his days drinking after finding no purpose in his post-stardom days, who is psychologically abused by his wife for, under her eyes, being a loser. He even ends up physically assaulting her and sent to prison, a prison which is in fact a tomb in the cemetery, where he is crucified. It's all kind of bizarre. But in these little narratives, you have a glimpse of how social expectations interfere with our minds, and in Goro's case, for instance, contribute to the suffering of someone who might be in a stage of his life where there is no sense of direction, with the only certainty being death, meanwhile questioning what's the takeaway from being alive. Batayan, the street musician who's depressed because he's unemployed, can be helped by the main character to be hired by the factory, only to find out he's even more miserable after finding a job. Interestingly, part of the process to get a kiss from him involves firing him. In this case, although it might be perceived as cruel, it's kind of just some sort of necessary violence in the process to freedom. And so when Batayan is free again, unemployed, we will have gained his trust and will receive the sad kiss. I think it's important to note that although these stories usually relate to artists and how they suffer under more rigid and productivity-focused environments, everyone, creative or not, can suffer from the same feeling of impotence and misdirection when not given the space and opportunities to pursue whatever their passion is. The game has some other examples to reinforce this. The underground residents are portrayed as an invincible kind of weird bunch, till you find out that they are actually essential workers who keep everything running in town. Invisible from the rest of the world, their idiosyncrasies can be seen as a representation of the uniqueness and individual expression. A slightly sadder and more bizarre interpretation is that this might be how they are perceived for not conforming to other people's expectations of them. The last challenge of the game is not a battle against God, but a test of your knowledge of all the characters you have found. It's a quiz. There is no overcoming of a final boss that acts as a bad guy with no motivation, but rather that you show what you found out about each character's multidimensionality, their fears, their failures, and their darker inner selves. Even if at a certain point they were posing as enemies that you needed to figure out how to kiss, the ultimate outcome of the game is the complete opposite of othering. For some reason, summer vacations feel very nostalgic, and I guess I can very obviously attribute that to the fact that they are this ephemeral period in the year where you were kind of free from responsibilities and could finally pursue your real interests outside of school as a kid. It feels very symptomatic even of the conditions under which our lives are structured. We yearn for that free time to explore at our own pace. What is interesting in Boku no Natsuyasumi is that we can see represented very well what having this kind of freedom can mean. We don't need to be herded into being productive to get out of bed. We don't need anyone telling us what we should be doing in order for us to do it. We should still be entitled to laziness and procrastination sometimes, but it's very clear that the fact that it will all be over too soon puts urgency in our actions. The game has a limited runtime. You will be playing through the month of August, after which the game ends. Each day also has a countdown. This means you can explore forever at your own will, but in a game where there are very few loose goals, it illustrates perfectly how we are still sprung into action motivated by our curiosity and will to see it all before it's gone. We don't spend the days laying around in the couch. We try to make the best out of the time we are given. So I think that the summer vacation, besides a snapshot, is a perfect parallel to the ephemerality of real life. And again, it shows very well that humans don't need suffering as a trigger for action. We just need to be very conscious of our mortality. But Boku no Natsuyasumi doesn't romanticize life either. There are no shallow and naive moralisms here like life is beautiful or seize the day. Throughout the game, Boku learns about death, getting old, loneliness, distance and loss. things we can control in general. We learn about these things through other characters, and it provides the perfect natural way of looking at it all. There are no moralisms, but there isn't any drama either, because although these are all painful facets of life, they are also a natural part of it, and a part we can control. So the game doesn't try to make you feel something about it. It just kind of makes you contemplate it, accept it, and move on, and I think that's pretty cool. The game is not full of melancholy all the time. There are really funny bits as well. I mean, the character design is already very cute, but they also contribute in some scenes to make it funnier, like how heads will pop up into the camera on a couple moments, or how Boku takes baths with other people while talking about random stuff with their little heads popping out of the bathtub. The scenarios in Boku no Natsuyasumi are very famous for being very detailed, but besides the detail, it's interesting to understand why they make us feel like we want to be and live there. The architecture is beautiful. The house where we spent the summer has 3 stories, in which the kitchen on the lowest floor stands on top of the water, and where the family has the meals, right next to the sea. There's loads of details like open windows and gentle breezes everywhere, to really engulf you in the environment. People leave their doors open throughout the day and night so air can run through, and they're not really worried if a stranger gets in. There aren't many areas where you can have privacy in any house, and people just share common places all the time. Even if 2 people are in different rooms, you can always get a glimpse of each other. Everything is so open that you feel like you are never quite alone. You even get called for dinner by your uncle no matter where you are in the woods. And if you're home, you will hear your aunt call you instead. One of the coziest moments of the day is when after dinner you can sit down and talk with the guests staying at the house, taking the cool night breeze and listening to the cicadas, learning about people you won't ever see again. About their past, their hopes, and how they're just trying to figure things out. And accepting that's just how life is.